Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We're following the fallout after that shocking moment in American history, the assassination attempt on former President Trump's life. The former president says the Republican convention scheduled to begin in Milwaukee tomorrow will go on as planned, and he is now on the ground there in Milwaukee. We're moments away from an Oval Office address from President Biden, and as we await the president's address to the nation, I want to bring in Kana Whitworth, who's also on the ground there in Milwaukee. So, Kana, set the scene for us. What have you been seeing all afternoon and into this early evening?
Well, I got to tell you, Linsey, they are getting ready for this thing to set off on Monday. And I also want to share with you some information just coming in from our political team here. Mary Alice Park sharing with us that on Saturday, after this assassination attempt on the former president, that the DNC chair called the head of the RNC. So they have spoken, and that she offered up the Democratic Party's continued opposition to any and all forms of political violence. And that is something that we keep hearing. It is being reiterated from both parties over and over again, that despite what party you're in, it now is a time for unity, and they want to tone down that rhetoric. We're also hearing similar reporting from John Santucci as well about how Donald Trump wants his team to approach this moment, again, toning it down, but sending that message of unity and resilience and toughness as they head into the RNC here. And Linsey, you can sort of see some people there behind me. We've been watching them do mic checks. We saw Senator Katie Britt from Alabama come up and do a mic check. I'm sure you remember her. She gave the rebuttal to the State of the Union. We also saw Governor Kristi Noem as well do a mic check. So really, they are getting this thing ready to go, Linsey. And I think that there is essentially a lot of excitement in the air, especially now that they know Donald Trump is on the ground here in Milwaukee. He did not delay his trip by a couple of days, as we initially thought that he would, Linsey.
All right, Kana Whitworth, our thanks to you. Now I want to go to ABC's David Muir with a special report.
David Muir.
Good evening. We're coming back on the air tonight because President Biden is about to address the nation from the Oval Office concerning the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Expected to call for unity in this country and to call for Americans to condemn political violence across the nation. The investigation into this horrific act is moving very quickly tonight. And of course, by now the world has seen these images. Former President Donald Trump taking the stage for his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania last night. It was just 8.5 minutes or so after walking onto that stage, a gunman opening fire. Trump's right ear was hit. The president seen reaching for his ear before finding cover behind that podium. You can hear the screams there in the video. Secret Service rushing the stage, racing to get him into a nearby SUV. Tonight, law enforcement revealing new details about the alleged gunman, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. They say he used an AR-style rifle owned by his father. And tonight here, the chilling photographs from New York Times photographer Doug Mills appearing to show one of those bullets very close to the president's head. Another image, Trump reaching for his wounded right ear, his hand pulling away, blood clearly on his fingers. The Secret Service says the suspect was armed with that rifle that was legally purchased by his father. Tonight, we want to listen to the president as he now addresses the nation about this political violence, this attempted assassination. Let's listen to the president.
Fellow Americans, I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers. Earlier today, I spoke about an ongoing investigation. We do not know the motive of the shooter yet. We don't know his opinions or affiliations. We don't know whether he had help or support or if he communicated with anyone else. Law enforcement professionals, as I speak, are investigating those questions. Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America. We've traveled it before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer. Whether it's with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. I've said it many times that the choice in this election we make in this election is going to shape the future of America and the world for decades to come. I believe that with all my soul. I know that millions of my fellow Americans believe it as well. And some have a different view as to the direction our country should take. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, or God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face the time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend into violence. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully, not through acts of violence. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. So tonight, I'm asking every American to recommit, to make America, think about it. What's made America so special? Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created a democracy that gave reason and balance a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all. May God protect our troops.
President Biden calling on unity from this country. Let's bring in Mary Bruce, our chief White House correspondent. Mary, we were told by this White House that the president would ask for all Americans to condemn political violence across this country, and that's what he did tonight.
David, this was a heartfelt call for unity from the president, a strong condemnation of political violence. The president there straight off the bat saying it is time to lower the temperature in our politics, urging the nation to come together. But the president also recognizing just how difficult that is to do in this incredibly divisive time in our country. The president saying that this is a time of testing and that the higher the stakes, the greater the burden. And given what he himself has argued is at stake in this election, it is going to be very difficult to do what the president is doing. But he is essentially issuing a challenge to all Americans today to take out their anger and frustration at the ballot box, not through violence, essentially arguing that it is counter to what this country stands for, David.
All right, Mary Bruce at the White House tonight as the president addresses the nation after this attempted assassination on former President Trump, calling for unity across our nation, saying we can have our political opinions, we should embrace each other's opinions, but we must do so peacefully, calling on all of us to condemn political violence. I should note that many of us here in the East will be watching a special report from ABC News just moments from now on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Stay tuned for that. And many of you in the West will be able to see that same special at 8 p.m. in the West as well. Stay tuned. That special for millions of Americans begins right now.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. You just heard President Biden there, in his own words, delivering a rare Oval Office address to the nation, calling it a time of testing and urging calm and unity following the attempted assassination of former President Trump. But several times he said we have to take a step back, take stock of where we are. Though we may disagree, we are not enemies. He said again, it is time to cool it down. And joining us now from Milwaukee, ABC's Kana Whitworth, who's on the ground there. Kana, President Biden calling for unity in this speech. Do you expect that will resonate in Milwaukee, where you are?
Well, I have to tell you that that word unity is the same thing that we are hearing from Republicans. It's the same thing that we're hearing from Donald Trump's team as well. And Linsey, you know, when you heard the president speak there, to Mary Bruce's point, he's essentially trying to use this moment to reinforce what they believe is the central moment to his candidacy, but also the central thesis to his campaign here is to try to save the democracy. And that's what you're hearing from Democrats. And he really believes that toning down this political violence, but also the rhetoric as well will help in that. But that's also something, again, that we are hearing from Donald Trump's team. Now that he is on the ground here in Milwaukee, he is urging his campaign staff to tone down that rhetoric and to use this moment to show that the Republican Party can be resilient and the Republican Party can be tough. But Linsey, I have to tell you, you know, I spent the day yesterday out speaking with dairy farmers, milk producers. It is crucial to the economy here in Wisconsin, and top of mind for them, this was prior to the assassination attempt, is safety within this country, within our own borders, and that is top of mind for them. So then when you see an event like this and they watch the candidate that they believe should be the next president of the United States nearly assassinated on television, it rings true for them, their concerns about safety within this country. And so what you're hearing, again, is the attempt here from both parties to unify and to let everybody's voices be heard, even if they are a bit divisive, that differing opinions matter. That's what makes our democracy so great, Linsey.
And we heard from Jay O'Brien earlier saying that many of the lawmakers who are going to be giving their speeches there throughout the week during the convention are going through and changing what they wrote to adjust to this attempted assassination. You also told us about the different themes that are taking place. We'd have to imagine on Tuesday night, when the theme is Make America Safe Again, that that's going to take on new meaning.
It certainly will, because they have the here and now of the actual safety that they're talking about. But you also have the divisive party line here about gun rights and control over firearms. And right now there's even a little bit of arguing about how that should be handled at the RNC, right? Because we know that this is a heightened threat environment. Security is being looked at very tightly. But at this point, you are allowed to have a firearm on the outer perimeter of this convention. So nowhere near the forum, but within walking distance, you are allowed to have a firearm. And again, the theme of Tuesday is Make America Safe once again. And I think that once again is really imperative when you think about what the Republican Party is trying to message here, Linsey, because they want to remind Americans of what it was like 4 years ago, how they felt 4 years ago. Did you feel safer as an American 4 years ago than you do right now? And you know, Linsey, President Biden brought up the fact that in all likelihood here at the RNC that his past would be dug into and potentially criticized. But you have to imagine, Linsey, that also they're going to be questioning the future of this country. And is Joe Biden up to the task of serving another 4 years? You know that the future will be in the spotlight here. Also on Tuesday, we don't want to forget that Nikki Haley is speaking. She is a foe of former President Donald Trump. She has been very critical of him. We know that she said she will vote for him. And then now very recently, she has released her delegates. She's encouraging them to support Donald Trump. And she will be taking the stage here at the Republican National Convention on Tuesday, on that day, Linsey, that you spoke about, that the theme is Make America Safe once again, Linsey.
Another thing that's interesting that John Santucci brought us was how even within the Trump campaign, after J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy released statements basically pointing the finger at President Biden and his campaign for this kind of rhetoric that became dangerous, potentially threatening the life of Donald Trump, that within the Trump campaign, they were also saying to tone it down, something that we also heard right off the top from President Biden. And so you have to imagine and question really what those speeches are going to look like when you have Donald Trump's own people saying, hey guys, let's bring it down.
Right. How will they modify those speeches in the wake of this assassination attempt? And from Jay O'Brien's reporting, while they're making those efforts to change those speeches, they do have to be approved, right? They have to go through several levels to get approved. But you're absolutely right, Linsey. When Donald Trump is telling his team and that campaign that they need to tone down the rhetoric, we don't want it to be so divisive, that certainly in all likelihood, changes will have to be made to some of those speeches. And I think that that's really crucial to some of these voters, Linsey. In speaking with some voters out here, I spoke with one. She considered herself a moderate. And at this point, she truly believes that supporting Donald Trump is the right thing for this country and the right thing for her. But she did say, Linsey, it's hard sometimes because his rhetoric upsets the apple cart so often. And sometimes voters find that harder to support, Linsey.
Kana Whitworth for us from Milwaukee. Thank you so much, Kate. I want to bring back in ABC's Mary Alice Parks, who joins us now. Mary Alice, your impressions to the president's remarks tonight.
I'm thinking so much of that classic line from President Biden. He wants to restore the soul of America. So much of his message tonight was exactly that, saying that we are a country of decency and grace, a real challenge to Americans to be better than this, saying that violence has absolutely no place in America and that we all have a responsibility to keep our neighbors safe. And like you've been talking about so much with Kana, to lower the political temperature. You know, I was sort of struck right off the bat. I felt myself actually a little bit emotional right off the bat, where he reminded all of us we will disagree, but we are neighbors, we are friends, we are fellow Americans. How important for us to remember that always at this time, especially in these elections where things get so heated. It was interesting to me, too, that he included this assassination attempt, this historic, unbelievably horrific assassination attempt on the former president in a long list of recent acts of political violence, clearly talking about this as a trend and a problem that has to be rooted out, Linsey.
And again, he talked about how politics, the appropriate arena is debate, not violence. This assassination attempt will undoubtedly change the campaign, perhaps both of them. What do you think the most immediate impact will be that we'll likely see center stage there in Milwaukee this week?
It'll be so interesting to see if it changes the relationship between these two men. We know that in the immediate aftermath, it has really put a pause on campaigning from Democrats. The Biden campaign halted all ads, tried to get ads pulled out from TV. They haven't been, they've really gone dark today that said this isn't a moment for campaigning. We are told that that's not going to last long, that we are in the middle of an election cycle. You heard the president there say that he expects that in Milwaukee, Republicans will talk about all the ways they disagree with his record. and that he's planning to go back out on the campaign trail to talk about how he disagrees with their vision. We know that the president and the Biden campaign are still planning to make this point that they believe Trump is still a threat to democracy. They are still going to talk about how he attempted to overturn the results of the 2020 election. They are still likely going to talk about how he has been close and trying to, and said, promising, I should say, to pardon those January 6 rioters. These are still central themes in the Biden campaign. They believe this is important for voters to be thinking about in November. But we heard the president there say that they need to keep the focus on people taking out their frustrations at the ballot box and finding a way to move past all of any political violence. Linsey.
And tomorrow, the president's schedule does include another Situation Room briefing. Can we expect that will be routine as the investigation into the shooting continues over the next days and weeks?
I imagine, and at the highest levels, of course, those that have been briefing the president include the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Director of Secret Service. You've seen the Vice President there in the Situation Room alongside the president. Clearly, they have to be on top of every bit of this investigation. And interesting, they have already promised an independent investigation as well, and to make the results of that investigation public. There's going to be such a call for transparency for the whole country to be able to understand what went wrong, what exactly happened yesterday. They need to find a way to restore faith in law enforcement, in the federal government in this moment when Americans are clearly and rightfully shaken. Linsey.
Mary Alice Parks for us. Thank you so much, Mary. Unity was, of course, the central key part of the president's remarks this evening, and he had one key message to the American people. Let's take a listen.
I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're our fellow Americans. We must stand together.
I want to bring back in ABC's Jay O'Brien, who's there on the scene in Milwaukee for us. Jay, any sense so far of what those at the convention think of the president's message?
We haven't seen much reaction yet, Linsey, only because this is very much still getting underway. They're very much still in the planning phase of this convention, or rather the preparation phase. We're seeing mic checks still happen. People are kind of mingling about the floor, but, you know, it's mainly media like myself and technicians, et cetera. But I can tell you that the overall message of unity that the president was expressing is one that I have heard from senior Republicans express as well. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, for instance, comes to note. He has said in recent days, really in the immediate aftermath of that attack on that Trump rally outwards, of this need to lower the political temperature, to not normalize political violence. And that was very much the theme of these remarks from President Biden as well, as we've been discussing over the course of the night. He called on Americans to see people who perhaps disagree with them politically as, you know, we're neighbors, we're friends. At the beginning of his remarks, you played that sound there. He called to take the temperature down. He called on everyone who is so politically engaged in this election, all Americans watching every moment of this election so closely. He called on all of us, as he put it, to, quote, take a step back. And I have heard Republicans ahead of this convention here in Milwaukee echo that, too. The immediate test of exactly what that looks like, though, taking a step back, will be had here in Milwaukee really 24 hours from right now when this convention gets underway. And that is because, as the president noted in his remarks, conventions are a political exercise. He said he expects people to take this stage behind me and criticize his record. But he noted that here in this country, you can disagree with someone politically without that turning into violence, without that turning into hate. And that's what the president called on. That's what I've heard senior Republicans call on as well. And the question becomes, when the various prominent notables of the Republican Party take that stage, what message do they express to the American people?
And we've talked a considerable amount about how this convention might be altered as a result of the shooting that took place yesterday. Is there any sense if the campaigns going forward are going to take on a different tone?
Well, what we're hearing is this theme. It's an unwritten theme. You know, there are various themes of this convention. The overall theme is Make America Great Again. And as you and I were discussing, each night has its own theme, like Monday is Make America Wealthy Again, Tuesday is Make America Safe Again, etc. But there is this other theme that's starting to take shape in my conversations with Republicans, in my conversations with delegates here, and that is this theme of defiance. It's almost the embodiment of that image of former President Trump as he put his fist in the air just moments after he was shot. I've heard from Republicans who say they have rallied to that image. They have been emboldened by that image, and they want to bring that tenor, that thought process to this convention as they also try to make their case to the American people for a second term of Donald Trump. So Republicans are really capturing or trying to capture that message of defiance in the wake of tragedy. The question becomes exactly what does that look like? And those conversations are still very preliminary from the Republican sources that I've talked to. No one exactly knows what exact shape that will take, but this convention is going to change significantly.
All right, Jay O'Brien, our thanks to you as always. The investigation into the suspect and his motives is ongoing. I want to bring in former Secret Service agent Don Mihalik. Don, thank you so much for joining us. You were involved with the most of the presidential campaigns from 2000 to 2016. What's your reaction to the shooting from yesterday?
Presidential campaigns and campaign stops are always frenetic. You never like to see incidents happen. This is a tragic incident. It's tragic that it occurred. It's going to take some time for the Secret Service, the FBI, and its local partners to figure out what happened, where the security gaps were. Overall, though, the agents involved in the detail, the counter sniper's response seemed appropriate, seemed right in line with their training. Questions, of course, are going to come out with the security planning, the security plan, and to figure out exactly what went wrong, how the individual got to where he got, and how he was able to set up and take the shots he set up. Granted, some of that questions are also going to involve their local and state stakeholders that supported the mission, the local and state police, because they have a piece of the security puzzle as well. Ultimately, the Secret Service is responsible for the plan, but to do that kind of a plan, they have to work hand in hand with their local and state law enforcement partners to make sure they can effect it.
So since you've been a part of these kinds of plans in the past, I'm just curious how unusual it would seem to you that there would be potentially a rooftop that somehow was not secured.
Well, we don't know if it's not secured because we really don't know what the security mitigation strategies are. Again, the Secret Service doesn't eliminate risk. They mitigate risk, and they use different risk mitigation strategies to do that, which could involve police posts, agent posts, observation posts, ground teams. We really don't know what that looks like because we don't have those answers yet. I am positive that during the advance process, that building and all the adjacent buildings were surveyed. The counter sniper teams typically do a long distance survey of potential threats out to 1,000 yards where they identify these threats. They put together grid plans to identify specific threats in a grid pattern. So if there is a threat, they can call it out by the grid and vector teams into it. And again, remember that Secret Service agents, although they do the national security mission of protection, they're also law enforcement officers. So they're forced to operate in the world of law enforcement when it comes to reacting to a potential threat. And it doesn't take a lot of time for somebody to climb onto a roof, drop down, unzip a bag, and pull out a rifle. So all that will have to be investigated, all that will have to be looked at, and we'll have to figure out what those answers are. And I'm confident the Secret Service will put in mitigation strategies so that never happens again.
And just in the last few seconds that we have here, you were part of the advance team for the DNC in 2016. As we get ready now on the eve of the RNC convention, what do you think the agents are looking at right now as they look to the security and make sure that everyone is safe?
Well, the RNC is a national special security event, as is the DNC this year. A national special security event is the highest level security event that the Department of Homeland Security gives to any type of an event that's going on. For the Secret Service, that's a planning process that starts almost 2 years out, where they're working with stakeholders across the board, both with the individual convention people to the local host cities, to the law enforcement partners to put together those security plans. And those security plans are constantly in development. They're constantly being adjusted.
Don, we thank you so much for your time and insight. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we thank you, the viewers, for streaming with us. I'm Linsey Davis, ABC News Live. We'll have more coverage on the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. And make sure to tune in at 10 p.m. for our ABC News special Trump assassination attempt, minute by minute. Keep it right here.